The hallway was dark. Every light in the Atherton estate had been turned off hours ago, and the only sound was the low hum of the central air system pushing through the vents. Minho Park walked barefoot across the cold hardwood floor, his silk robe hanging loose over a white t-shirt and sweatpants. He had given up on sleep again. 11 days now. 11 days since the doctors at the Beverly Hills facility sat him down and told him his mother had 3 months to live. Maybe 4 if the treatment responded, maybe less if it did not. He had not told anyone, not his brother, not his staff, not his business partners. He carried it the way he carried everything, silently, with his jaw tight and his back straight and his eyes giving away nothing. Minho was halfway down the second-floor hallway, heading toward the kitchen for water he did not really want, when he heard it. A voice, low, soft, coming from behind the closed door of the small staff bedroom near the back staircase. He stopped walking. His bare feet made no sound on the floor as he stood still and listened. It was Maria, his new maid. She had been working in the estate for 3 weeks. She was quiet, efficient, and kept mostly to herself. He had barely spoken to her beyond basic instructions. He did not even know her last name until he saw it on the employment paperwork Mrs. Cho had filed. Bellamy, Maria Bellamy. She was praying. Minho stepped closer to the door. He told himself he was not eavesdropping. He was just passing by. But his feet did not move past the door. They stopped right beside it, and he leaned his shoulder against the wall and listened. "Lord, I am asking you to cover this house tonight," Maria said. Her voice was barely above a whisper, but the walls in this part of the estate were thin, and the hallway was silent enough to hear a pin drop. "I am asking you to touch Mr. Park. I do not know what is wrong, Lord, but I can see it. He walks through this house like he is carrying something that is too heavy for one person. He does not eat. He does not sleep. I hear him packing at night, Lord. I hear him walking these halls like a ghost, and it breaks my heart because nobody in this house seems to notice." Minho's breath caught in his throat. "Whatever is hurting him," Maria continued, "whatever is stealing his peace, I am asking you to lift it. He does not know me. He probably does not even remember my name. But I see him, Lord, and I am asking you to let him know that he is not alone, even if he never finds out I prayed this. Even if he never knows, just let him feel it. Let him feel that somebody cares." Minho pressed his back flat against the wall. His jaw was so tight that his teeth ached. His eyes burned. He blinked hard. Then again. Then a tear slid down his left cheek and he could not stop it. Another one followed. Then another. His chest shook with the effort of keeping silent. He pressed his fist against his mouth and squeezed his eyes shut and stood there in the dark hallway of his own home, completely undone by a woman he barely knew, fighting for him in a way nobody in his entire life had ever fought for him before. He slid down the wall until he was sitting on the floor. He sat there for a long time, long after Maria's prayer ended, long after the light under her door went dark. He sat there with his knees up and his head back against the wall and his face wet and asked himself when the last time was that someone had cared about him without wanting something in return. He could not remember. Minho Park was 34 years old. He was the CEO of Park Capital Group, a Korean-American real estate and private equity empire based out of Silicon Valley that controlled over $4 billion in assets. His family's wealth stretched back 3 generations in Seoul before his father relocated to the United States in the 1980s. The business world did not call Minho powerful. They called him dangerous. They called his family the Korean Mafia because of the way they operated, hostile takeovers executed with surgical precision, loyalty enforced like law, disloyalty punished with career-ending consequences. Minho had destroyed entire companies because a single executive disrespected him in a boardroom. He had blacklisted people from industries with one phone call. His reputation was earned, and it preceded him into every room he entered. But none of that mattered right now. Right now, he was a man sitting on the floor of his own hallway, crying because the maid prayed for him, and it was the kindest thing anyone had done for him in years. He did not know how long he sat there. Eventually, he stood up. He wiped his face with the sleeve of his robe. He walked back to his bedroom. He did not sleep that night either. But for the first time in 11 days, the weight on his chest felt slightly different. Not lighter, just less lonely. Maria Bellamy was 27 years old. She was a black woman with fair skin and deep brown eyes, and the kind of quiet beauty that did not demand attention but received it anyway. She was from Scottsdale, Arizona, and she had taken this live-in maid position because she had nowhere else to go, not because she was lazy or untalented. The opposite. Maria Bellamy had one of the most extraordinary singing voices anyone who heard it had ever encountered. 2 years ago, someone recorded her singing at a street fair in Old Town Scottsdale and posted it on TikTok. The video got 4 million views in a week. She got calls from managers and small labels. She had meetings scheduled. She was close, so close she could taste it, to a life she had dreamed about since she was 13 years old. Then her mother was diagnosed with lupus, and Maria dropped everything. Every meeting, every callback, every dream. She moved back into her mother's apartment and became her full-time caretaker. Her mother lived for 2.5 years. She passed away 8 months ago. She left Maria with $74,000 in medical debt, no savings, and a voice that nobody in the industry remembered anymore. The job at the Park estate paid well and included room and board. Maria took it because it was the most practical option she had. She did not know anything about Minho Park when she accepted the position. She did not know about his reputation or his wealth or his power. All she knew, after 3 weeks of working in his home, was that he was a man in pain. She could see it in the way he moved. She could hear it in the silence he carried everywhere. And Maria Bellamy was the kind of person who, when she saw someone hurting, could not help but pray. She had no idea he was listening. Have you ever prayed for someone who did not even know you cared? Have you ever fought for someone in the dark, not knowing if it would make any difference? If that hits you somewhere deep, drop a comment right now and tell me about it, and do well to like the video. Now, let's continue. The next morning, Minho came downstairs earlier than usual. He told himself it had nothing to do with Maria. He told himself he was just adjusting his schedule. But when he walked into the kitchen and sat down at the island, something he never did because he always took breakfast in his study, he knew he was lying to himself. Maria was already there. She was wiping down the countertops with her back to him, humming something low and sweet. She did not hear him come in. He sat on the bar stool and watched her move for a full 30 seconds before she turned around and saw him. She flinched. Her hand flew to her chest. "Mr. Park, I am sorry. I did not know you were there." "It is fine," he said. His voice was flat, controlled, the same voice he used in every interaction. "Continue what you were doing." She nodded and turned back to her work, but she stopped humming. The silence that replaced it felt louder than the song had been. Minho's house manager, Mrs. Cho, walked into the kitchen 45 seconds later and stopped dead in her tracks. Mrs. Cho was a stern Korean woman in her late 50s who had worked for the Park family for 15 years. She had never once seen Minho sit in the kitchen. She looked at him. She looked at Maria. She said nothing, but her eyes said everything. Later that morning, Maria called her younger sister Naomi. She did this every day at 7, sitting on the small bench outside the staff entrance where she got the best reception. Naomi was 22, a senior at Arizona State, studying early childhood education. She was bright and talkative and had no idea how bad things had gotten for Maria after their mother died. Maria had made sure of that. She still sent Naomi $300 a month, even though some months it meant Maria could not afford to replace her own shoes. Naomi thought Maria was doing fine. Maria let her believe it. That afternoon, the estate chef, a Filipino man named Ramon who had been cooking for wealthy families in the Bay Area for 20 years, was prepping dinner in the kitchen. Maria was nearby, organizing the pantry. Ramon looked over at her and said, "Sing something." Maria shook her head. "I do not really sing for people." "Girl, I heard you humming this morning. You think these walls are thick. They are not. Come on, sing something. This kitchen is too quiet." Maria hesitated. Then she started, softly at first, almost under her breath. She sang, "His Eye is on the Sparrow," an old gospel hymn her mother used to sing every Sunday morning while making breakfast. By the second verse, her voice had opened up. It filled the kitchen. It filled the hallway beyond the kitchen. It went through the open windows and floated out to where the groundskeeper, a retired Mexican-American man named Gus, was raking leaves near the garden wall. Gus stopped raking. He stood there with both hands on the rake and listened. Ramon stopped chopping. He put down the knife. By the time Maria reached the chorus, his eyes were wet. He wiped them with his apron and shook his head slowly. "Girl," he said when she finished, "what are you doing cleaning toilets?" Maria smiled. but it was the kind of smile that held sadness in its corners. Cleaning toilets pays the bills, Ramon. Singing does not. Upstairs in his study, Minho's door was open. He had heard every note. He sat at his desk with his laptop open in front of him, but he had stopped working the moment her voice reached him. When the song ended, he leaned back in his chair and stared at the ceiling. The silence that followed felt like something had been taken away. That evening, Minho took a phone call that changed the temperature of everything. Victor Hale was on the other end. Victor was a real estate mogul based in Palo Alto, a ruthless American businessman who had been trying to undercut Park Capital Group for years. He was charming in the way that venomous things are sometimes beautiful, pleasant to look at, dangerous to touch. Minho, Victor said, his voice smooth and casual. I heard about your mother. I just wanted to call and offer my condolences. Minho's hand tightened around the phone. The information about his mother's diagnosis was private, extremely private. Only his brother Seo-jun and his mother's medical team knew. Where did you hear that? Minho asked, his voice dangerously calm. People talk, Victor said. You know how it is. Minho ended the call without responding. He sat in his study for a long time, staring at the phone. Someone in his inner circle was leaking personal information to Victor Hale. Someone close to him was betraying him, and he did not know who. That night, Minho walked the hallway again. He slowed near Maria's door. He listened. There was no sound this time. She was already asleep. He stood there for a full minute anyway, feeling the ghost of her prayer still hanging in the air, before turning and walking back to his room alone. Every Wednesday and Sunday, Minho drove to Beverly Hills to visit his mother. Eunice Park was 61 years old and had been the backbone of the Park family long before the empire existed. She was small, elegant, and sharper than most people half her age, even now weakened by the illness that was slowly claiming her. This Wednesday, Minho arrived at the private medical facility to find his younger brother Seo-jun already in the room. Seo-jun was 29, the opposite of Minho in almost every way, warm, expressive, openly emotional, and deeply resentful that Minho had inherited control of the family business simply for being the firstborn. He believed Minho was cold, calculating, and cared more about the company than about the people in his life. You are 30 minutes late, Seo-jun said, without looking up from their mother's bedside. I had a meeting. You always have a meeting. Their mother's eyes were closed, but she was not asleep. Stop, Eunice said softly. Both of you, I am too tired for this today. They sat in silence for a while. Then Seo-jun said something that cut deep. If this was a board meeting, you would have been on time, but it is just your mother's hospital room, so it can wait. Minho's jaw tightened. You do not know what you are talking about. I know exactly what I am talking about. You built an empire, and somewhere along the way, you forgot that people are not assets. They argued. It was quiet and controlled. The way Park men argued, no shouting, just words placed with surgical precision to cause maximum damage. Eunice finally opened her eyes and grabbed Minho's hand. She looked up at him and said something in Korean that pierced straight through every wall he had built. You carry too much alone. That is not strength, that is pride. Minho drove back to Atherton, with those words ringing in his head, like a bell that would not stop. He arrived at the estate late. The house was dark except for the light in the kitchen. He walked in to get water and found Maria sitting at the counter with a small notebook open in front of her, writing. The moment she saw him, she jumped up. Mr. Park, I am so sorry. I am not supposed to be in here after hours. I will go. Sit down, he said. She hesitated. Please, he added softer. She sat. He got his water. He leaned against the opposite counter. There was a silence between them that was not uncomfortable, but was thick with something neither of them was ready to name. He glanced at the notebook. Do you write? He asked. It is nothing, she said, closing the notebook quickly. Just things I put down sometimes. He did not push. Instead, he asked a question that surprised both of them. Do you believe prayer actually works? Maria looked at him carefully. She had no idea why he was asking. She had no idea he had heard her that night. She said, Yes, I have seen it work. How? She told him about her mother, how the doctors gave her 6 months and she lived for 2.5 years. Prayer did not save her forever, Maria said, "but it gave me time I was not supposed to have, and I would rather have that than nothing." Minho stared at her for a long moment. Something shifted behind his eyes. Then he nodded, set down his glass, and left without another word. Maria sat there in the quiet kitchen, staring at the door he had just walked through, wondering what had just happened. The next day, Mrs. Cho pulled Maria aside in the laundry room. Her tone was not unkind, but it was firm. "I have been watching you," Mrs. Cho said, "and I need to tell you something. Keep your distance from Mr. Park." Maria blinked. "I have not done anything." "I know you have not, and I am telling you this so you do not. He is not the kind of man who lets people close. And when he does, they end up hurt, not because he is cruel, because the world around him is." Maria nodded, but the warning did not scare her. It made her curious. That night, Minho was in his study when his phone vibrated. An email from an unknown address. The subject line read, "Even kings lose their queens." He opened it. Inside were photographs of his mother entering the Beverly Hills Medical Facility, taken from a distance, surveillance style. Someone was threatening him. They knew about his mother. They knew his only weakness. Minho closed the laptop. His face was perfectly still, but his hands were shaking. Minho called Darren Cole first thing the next morning. Darren was his head of security, a former military operative who had been working for the Park family for 6 years. He was calm, methodical, and the only person Minho trusted with anything classified. Minho forwarded the email. Darren traced it to a proxy server but could not pinpoint the sender. "It is professional," Darren said. "Whoever did this knows what they are doing." Minho suspected Victor Hale, but suspicion was not proof, and Minho did not act on anything without proof. He doubled security around his mother's facility. He became colder, more withdrawn. The staff noticed. Ramon told Maria that Minho had not eaten a full meal in 2 days. He kept sending trays back to the kitchen barely touched. Maria thought about it all afternoon. Then she did something bold. She went online and searched for a simple Korean soup recipe. She found one for kongnamulguk, a soybean sprout soup that was considered comfort food in Korean households. She was not sure she made it right. The seasoning felt off and she second-guessed herself 3 times while cooking it. But she put it in a bowl, carried it upstairs, and left it outside Minho's study door with a small note that read, "You should eat. M." She walked away before he could open the door. Minho heard the soft knock. He waited a moment, then opened the door. He looked down, the bowl of soup, the note. He picked it up and read it. He stood in the doorway for a long time. Then he took it inside and sat at his desk and ate every drop. The seasoning was slightly off. It was not his mother's recipe, but it was the most meaningful meal anyone had made for him in years because nobody asked Maria to do it. Nobody expected it. She just saw that he was not eating and she did something about it. He kept the note. He put it in the top drawer of his desk. He did not examine why. 2 weeks later, Ramon's daughter was getting married. The reception was at a venue in Palo Alto, and Ramon had been talking about it for months. He asked Maria to sing at the wedding. She refused at first. She had not performed in front of a real audience in over 2 years. The idea of standing in front of strangers and opening her mouth made her chest tight. "Come on," Ramon said. "You sang in my kitchen and made me cry into a pot of adobo. You can handle a wedding." Maria agreed because Ramon had been kind to her from her very first day at the estate, and she could not say no to someone who had shown her kindness. At the wedding, Maria stood at the front of the reception hall in a borrowed dress and sang "At Last" by Etta James. The room went silent within the first 4 bars. People stopped eating. People stopped talking. By the second verse, the bride was crying. By the bridge, half the room was crying. When she finished, the applause was thunderous. Ramon's daughter hugged her so hard Maria could barely breathe and said, "You just made my wedding the most beautiful day of my life." Maria cried in the bathroom afterward, not from sadness, because she had forgotten what it felt like to be seen for the thing she was put on this earth to do. Mrs. Cho mentioned the wedding performance to Minho casually 2 days later. Minho said nothing. But that evening, he pulled up the video that one of the guests had posted on Instagram. He watched it 3 times. He watched the way Maria closed her eyes when she sang, the way her body seemed to disappear, and her voice became the only thing in the room that was real. He saved the video to his phone. A few days later, Maria was cleaning the estate library, which was Minho's favorite room. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, leather chairs, a fireplace that was never lit. She did not realize Minho was sitting in the high-backed chair in the far corner, partially hidden by the angle of the shelves. She started singing softly, something original, something from her notebook. The lyrics were about feeling invisible in a world that only valued what you could produce. When she finished, Minho said quietly from the chair, "That is yours, is it not?" Maria nearly dropped the book she was holding. She spun around and saw him sitting there, her face flushed with embarrassment. "Mr. Park, I did not know you were in here. I am so sorry." He was not smiling, but his eyes were different, softer than she had ever seen them. "You should not be cleaning houses," he said. Maria straightened her shoulders. "Cleaning houses pays the bills, singing does not." "It should," he said. He held her gaze. She held his. The silence between them was so full it could have filled the entire room. Then she looked away, picked up her cleaning supplies, and left. Minho sat in the leather chair and stared at the space where she had been standing for a very long time. That weekend, Minho attended a business dinner in San Francisco. Victor Hale was there. Minho had not expected him. Victor approached his table during the cocktail hour, all smiles and casual confidence. They exchanged the kind of pleasantries that were not pleasant at all. Then Victor leaned in slightly and said, "I heard you hired a new songbird at that big estate of yours. Talented girl, from what I hear." Minho's blood went cold. Victor should not know anything about his household staff. The leak was closer than he thought, and now Victor Hale knew about Maria. Minho launched a full internal investigation. Darren Cole began monitoring the communications of everyone in Minho's inner circle, his executive assistant, his 3 closest business partners, and every member of the household staff. Minho hated it. He was a private man being forced to spy on the people closest to him, and it turned his stomach. But he did it anyway, because someone he trusted was handing pieces of his life to a man who would use them as weapons, and he could not let that continue. While the investigation ran in the background, something else was happening. Something Minho could not control with meetings and security protocols. He was falling. It started small. He began finding reasons to be in whatever room Maria was in. He would bring his laptop to the kitchen and work at the island while she cleaned. He would ask Mrs. Cho to have Maria organize the library shelves, even though they were already organized. He asked Maria to sing while she worked, and she did shy at first, then more freely, her voice filling the rooms of the estate like sunlight. Then came the moment that changed everything. Minho was on a video call with his mother. It was a Sunday afternoon. He was in the living room with the phone propped up when Maria walked through on her way to the laundry room, humming. Eunice heard the humming through the phone, and her face changed immediately. "Who is that?" Eunice asked. Minho hesitated. Then he turned the phone so his mother could see Maria, who had stopped walking and was now standing awkwardly in the middle of the room. "You," Eunice said, her voice brightening in a way Minho had not heard in weeks. "You sing like an angel. Come closer." Maria looked at Minho. He nodded. She walked closer to the phone, nervous, and smiled politely. "Hello, Mrs. Park." "Sing me something," Eunice said. "Please, anything." Maria looked at Minho again. He did not say anything, but something in his expression said go ahead. So Maria sang Amazing Grace. Just the first verse and chorus, soft and unadorned. Eunice's eyes filled with tears before Maria reached the second line. By the time the chorus ended, Eunice was crying freely. Minho watched his dying mother smile for the first time in weeks. Because of Maria. Because of this woman who cleaned his bathrooms and prayed for him in the dark and had no idea the power she carried in her voice and in her heart. After Maria left the room, Eunice spoke to Minho privately. "She has a good heart," Eunice said. "I can hear it in her voice. Do not let that one go." "Iyama, she is my maid," Minho said. "And your father was a fisherman's son before he built an empire," Eunice replied. "What is your point?" Minho had no answer. 3 days later, Darren Cole walked into Minho's study and closed the door. His face was the kind of carefully blank that meant bad news. He sat down across from Minho and said, "I found the leak." "Who?" Darren slid a folder across the desk. Inside were screenshots of text messages, emails, and phone records. Minho opened the folder. He read the first page. He read the second page. Then he stopped reading and sat perfectly still. The leak was Seojun. his own brother. Seo Jun had been communicating with Victor Hale for 4 months. Victor had reached out to him privately, offering a partnership, a way for Seo Jun to step out from Minho's shadow and build something of his own. In exchange, Victor wanted inside information about Park Capital Group, vulnerabilities, strategies, personal details. Seo Jun had rationalized it as harmless. Business was business, but he was the one who told Victor about their mother's illness. He was the one who mentioned the new maid with the incredible voice. Minho closed the folder. He did not slam it. He did not throw anything. He sat in absolute silence for 2 full minutes while Darren watched him. When he finally spoke, his voice was so quiet it was almost inaudible. "Get out," he said. "I need to be alone." That evening, Minho drove to Seo Jun's apartment in San Jose. He did not call ahead. He knocked on the door. When Seo Jun opened it, he saw his brother's face and knew immediately. "How did you find out?" Seo Jun asked. "How could you do it?" Minho responded. The confrontation lasted 45 minutes. It was not physical, but it was raw and devastating. Seo Jun screamed that Minho had never once asked him what he wanted, that Minho had controlled the family empire with an iron grip and left no room for Seo Jun to be anything more than the younger brother, that Minho treated people like assets and relationships like transactions, and that Seo Jun was suffocating. Minho listened to all of it. Then he said, in a voice that shook with the effort of staying controlled, "I spent my entire life protecting you. Every deal I made, every move I calculated, I did with this family in mind, with you in mind. And you took the most personal, most painful thing in my life, our mother dying, and you handed it to a man who would use it to destroy us." Seo Jun had no answer for that. He opened his mouth and nothing came out. Minho left. He drove back to Atherton in silence. He did not turn on the radio. He did not make any calls. When he walked into the estate, Maria was in the hallway. She took one look at his face and knew something was deeply wrong. He looked darker and more closed off than she had ever seen him. She brought him tea. She set it on the table beside him. He did not look at her. She started to leave. His voice stopped her. "Does prayer work when the person who hurts you is the person you would die for?" Maria turned. She looked at him. His eyes were red. His jaw was clenched so tight the muscles in his face were visible. She said, "That is when it matters most." She left. Minho picked up the tea. His hand was shaking. Victor Hale made his next move within a week. Using the information Seo Jun had given him, he launched a preemptive strike on Park Capital Group's biggest upcoming deal, a major acquisition in Bellevue, Washington, worth over $600 million. Victor undercut the bid, reached out to the sellers directly, and nearly torpedoed 3 months of negotiations overnight. But that was not the worst of it. A man in a suit arrived at the Park estate. He was polite and professional. He asked for Minho by name. When Minho came to the door, the man handed him a leather folder and said, "From Mr. Hale," with his compliments. Inside the folder were photographs. Maria at the grocery store in Atherton. Maria walking to the small coffee shop she visited on her days off. A photo of her sister Naomi's college apartment in Tempe, Arizona. A photo of her mother's grave in Scottsdale. The attached note read, "You are getting distracted, Park. I do not blame you. She is lovely. But distractions have consequences." Minho stared at the photos. His hand was steady. His face was calm. But inside, something locked into place. A cold, absolute clarity. Victor Hale had just threatened Maria, and the game had just changed from business to war. Minho did not tell Maria everything right away, but he made changes that she noticed. A driver suddenly insisted on taking her wherever she needed to go. A new security camera appeared near the staff entrance. Darren Cole seemed to be around more often, his eyes always scanning. Maria noticed. She was not stupid. She found Minho in his study one evening and stood in the doorway until he looked up. "Am I in danger?" she asked directly. Minho looked at her. He wanted to lie. He physically wanted to construct a sentence that would make her feel safe without revealing the truth. But he could not to her. "Someone is trying to get to me," he said, "and they might try to use you to do it. I will not let that happen." "Why would anyone use me to get to you?" "Because they know I care about you." The words came out before he could filter them. They hung in the air between them like smoke. It was the first time he had said it out loud. To her, to himself. Maria was quiet for a long time. Then she asked, "Should I leave?" Minho stood up from his desk. "You can. I will give you severance, a reference, anything you need. But I am asking you to stay." Maria looked at him. She saw the man behind the reputation. The man who sat on the floor of his own hallway and cried because she prayed for him. The man who ate her imperfect soup and kept the note. The man who told his dying mother she was just the maid and had his mother see right through it. "I will stay," she said. 1 week later, Mrs. Cho, who had slowly and reluctantly warmed to Maria over the preceding months, told Minho that the Park Foundation's annual benefit was approaching. It was a prestigious event held every year in Newport Beach, attended by the wealthiest families on the West Coast. Mrs. Cho, who had coordinated events before joining the Park household, suggested that Maria could perform. Minho considered it. He went to Maria. She was terrified. She told him she was not ready. "I have heard you sing in an empty kitchen and make a grown man cry," Minho said. "You are ready." Maria spent the next week preparing. Ramon helped her pick a dress, simple, black, elegant. Gus, the groundskeeper, came to her the day before the event and pressed a small gold cross necklace into her hand. "This was my wife's," he said. "She would have wanted you to have it for tomorrow." Maria's eyes welled up. "Gus, I cannot take this." "You are not taking it," he said. "You are borrowing it. Bring it back with a story." The entire staff rallied around her. Every time she rehearsed in the estate's living room, whoever was in the house stopped what they were doing to listen. The night before the benefit, Maria and Minho sat on the back terrace of the estate. The Silicon Valley hills were dark shapes against the sky. The air was cool and clean. Maria was nervous, picking at the hem of her sleeve. "Can I tell you something?" she said. "Yes." She told him about the TikTok video, about the 4 million views, about the calls and the meetings and how close she had been. Then she told him about walking away from all of it because her mother needed her. "I do not regret it," she said. "I would do it again, but sometimes I wonder who I would have been." Minho was quiet for a moment. Then he told her something he had never told anyone outside his family. He told her about his father's funeral, how he was 9 years old and his grandfather pulled him aside and said, "The eldest son does not cry. The eldest son carries." He had been carrying ever since. "You know," Maria said softly, "it is okay to put it down sometimes." "I do not know how." "You start by letting someone help you hold it." They did not kiss. They did not need to. The space between them was already full of everything they were not saying. The next evening, the Park Foundation benefit took place at a stunning oceanfront venue in Newport Beach. 500 guests. Crystal chandeliers. The kind of wealth that made the air feel different. Maria was backstage in her simple black dress, holding the gold cross necklace from Gus. She peeked through the curtain and saw hundreds of the most powerful people in America seated in rows. Her hands were shaking. Then her eyes landed on the third row. A man she did not recognize was sitting there, looking directly at the stage. He was smiling, not a warm smile, a calculated one, like he had been waiting for this moment. Victor Hale was at the benefit. He had got himself invited, and he was looking right at where Maria would be standing. Maria saw Victor's face through the gap in the curtain and something in her gut twisted. She did not know who he was. She had never seen him before. But the way he was staring at the stage, at her, made the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. Her hands tightened around the gold cross necklace. She almost backed out. She almost turned around and walked back through the service corridor and out the side entrance and kept walking until the lights and the people and the pressure were behind her. She almost let the fear win. Then she heard Minho's voice in her head, not from tonight. From days ago, standing in his study with that steady, certain look in his eyes. "You are ready." Maria closed her eyes. She took a breath so deep it expanded her entire chest. She gripped the necklace one last time. Then she walked out onto that stage. The lights hit her and she could not see individual faces anymore. That helped. The room was a blur of gold and crystal. She stood at the microphone. The backing track started. But Maria had decided that morning that she did not want a backing track. She had asked the audio team to cut it. She was singing this one a cappella. She opened her mouth and sang an original song, something from her notebook, something she had never performed for anyone. The song was about a woman who had lost everything, her mother, her career, her direction. and discovered that the thing she thought was her weakness, her soft heart, her stubborn faith, her refusal to stop caring about people even when it cost her everything, was actually the thing that kept her alive. The first note hung in the air like a question. By the end of the first verse, the room was completely silent. 500 people who spent their lives talking over each other and negotiating and performing power had gone absolutely still. By the chorus, a woman in the second row was pressing a napkin to her eyes. By the bridge, people were standing. When Maria hit the final note and let it hang there, raw and unfiltered and impossibly beautiful, the silence lasted 3 full seconds. Then the room exploded. 500 people on their feet. The applause was deafening. Minho was standing at the back of the room. He was not clapping. He was not moving. His eyes were locked on Maria and there were tears running down his face, and he did not care that Mrs. Cho was standing right beside him and could see every one of them. Mrs. Cho looked at his face and said quietly, "Your mother was right about her." Minho did not respond. He did not need to. After the performance, the reception buzzed with Maria's name. People were asking who she was, where she came from, whether she had an album. Maria was overwhelmed. She stood near the edge of the reception area, clutching a glass of water, trying to breathe. That was when Victor Hale approached her. He was charming, disarming. He smiled warmly and told her that her performance was the most extraordinary thing he had heard in 20 years. He told her he had connections in the music industry. Real connections. People who could change her life overnight. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a business card. "I would love to help you," he said, extending the card. "No strings attached." Maria looked at the card. Something in his voice felt rehearsed, like every word had been chosen in advance. Before she could respond, a hand appeared between them. Minho. He stepped between Maria and Victor with the controlled calm of a man who was choosing, deliberately and with great effort, not to unleash something devastating. "She does not need your help, Victor," Minho said. Victor's smile widened. "She is a grown woman, Minho. Let her decide." Minho turned to Maria. He did not tell her what to do. He did not order her or command her or use his authority. He said simply, "This man is not what he seems. I will explain everything later. But right now, I am asking you to trust me." Maria looked at Victor. She looked at the card in his hand. She looked at Minho. Then she handed the card back to Victor and said, "I appreciate the offer, but I am good." Something flickered behind Victor's eyes. His smile stayed in place, but it lost its warmth entirely. He nodded, tucked the card back into his pocket, and walked away. On the drive back to Atherton, Maria sat in the passenger seat and said, "Tell me everything." And he did. He told her about Victor Hale, about the threatening emails, about the photos of her and her sister, about the surveillance, about Seojun. He told her everything because he was done carrying it alone and because she had asked him to let her help hold it and he was finally ready to try. Maria listened to every word without interrupting. When he finished, the car was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "You have been protecting me this entire time and you never said a word." "I did not want you to be afraid." "I am not afraid." He looked at her, she looked at him. He reached across the center console and took her hand. She let him. It was the first time they had ever touched. His hand was warm, hers was steady. It was everything. When they arrived at the estate, he walked her to her door. She turned. They were close. Close enough that she could smell his cologne and he could see the small scar above her left eyebrow that she had never told him the story behind. "I heard you," he said. "That night, the prayer." Maria's breath caught. "You heard that?" He nodded, every word. "Why did you never say anything?" "Because nobody has ever fought for me like that, and I did not know what to do with it." Maria placed her hand on his chest, right over his heart. She could feel it beating fast under her palm. "You do not have to do anything with it," she said. "Just receive it." Minho pulled her close. He wrapped his arms around her and held her against his chest. Not a kiss, a hold. Like she was the only solid thing in a world that kept shifting under him. Maria pressed her face against his shoulder and closed her eyes and held him back. They stayed like that for a long time. The next morning, Maria's phone rang. It was Naomi. She was talking fast, her voice high with panic. Someone had showed up at her campus apartment in Tempe the day before, a man in a suit. He did not say anything threatening. He just left an envelope with Naomi's name on it. Inside was a typed note. Ask your sister who she is really working for. Naomi was scared. Maria's blood went cold. She found Minho in his study and told him. She watched his face change, not into anger, into something colder than anger, something final. He went after my sister, Maria said, her voice shaking for the first time since Minho had known her. Minho stood up. He will not touch her, I promise you that. Minho moved fast. Within 2 hours, he had Darren Cole contact a private security firm in Arizona with instructions to provide around-the-clock protection for Naomi on campus. He called his legal team. He called his board. He called in every favor he had built over 15 years in the most competitive business world in America. The meeting took place at Park Capital Group's headquarters in Menlo Park. Minho sat at the head of the table and laid out every piece of evidence: the threatening emails, the photographs of Maria, the intimidation of Naomi, the leaked information traced back to Seo-jun and connected to Victor Hale. His legal counsel told him they had enough for a restraining order and potentially a corporate espionage case. Minho said that was not enough. Because Minho had been waiting. For weeks, while everyone thought he was reacting defensively, he had been gathering something Victor did not know about. Through Darren Cole's deep investigation, they had uncovered that Victor Hale had been engaging in fraudulent property appraisals to inflate values across 3 major real estate deals, one in Bellevue, one in San Francisco, and one in Scottsdale. Fake appraisals. Manipulated numbers. Securities fraud on a scale that would bring federal investigators running. Minho had not reported it immediately. He had waited. He let Victor get comfortable. He let Victor think he was winning. He let Victor overplay his hand with the threats and the photos and the intimidation because every single move Victor made was another piece of evidence stacking up. Now it was time. Minho sent the evidence simultaneously to the SEC, to the FBI's Financial Crimes Division, and to 3 major financial publications. Within 48 hours, federal investigators opened a formal inquiry into Victor Hale and his business practices. His partners began distancing themselves publicly. His stock price dropped 9% in a single day. His name was on every financial news outlet in the country, and not one headline was kind. Victor called Minho. His voice was no longer smooth. It was raw and shaking with fury. Minho answered the phone. He listened to Victor rant for approximately 15 seconds. Then he said 5 words. You should not have threatened her. He hung up. While Victor Hale's world crumbled, something else was happening. Something Minho had not expected. Seo-jun showed up at the Atherton estate. He looked terrible. His clothes were wrinkled. His eyes were bloodshot. He had lost weight. He did not come to Minho first. He went to the kitchen, where Maria was sitting with Ramon, and he stood in the doorway until she looked up. Can I talk to you? He asked. Ramon looked between them and quietly left the room. Seo-jun sat across from Maria and told her everything. He told her he was the leak. He told her he was the reason Victor knew about her. He told her that the photos, the threats, the man who showed up at Naomi's apartment, all of it traced back to information he had provided. He told her he did it because he was bitter and small and jealous of his brother, and that he had been so consumed with his own resentment that he did not stop to think about who else would get hurt. I am not asking for your forgiveness, he said. I do not deserve it. I just wanted you to hear the truth from me. Maria looked at him for a long time. She saw a man drowning in his own guilt. She saw someone who had done a terrible thing and knew it and could not undo it. You should be telling your brother this, she said. Not me. I'm afraid too. Good, that means it matters. Seo-jun went to Minho's study. He knocked. Minho told him to come in. Seo-jun sat in the chair across from his brother's desk, and for the first time in his life, he did not lead with anger or resentment or sarcasm. He led with the truth. He admitted everything. He apologized. Not the kind of apology that comes with excuses, but the kind that sits in the open with nothing to protect it. He said he wanted to matter. He said he wanted to be more than Minho's shadow. He said he was wrong and he knew he had broken something that might never fully heal. Minho stared at his brother for a long, terrible moment. The silence in the study was so heavy it was hard to breathe. Then Minho said, You are my blood. I have been angry. I am still angry, but I am not going to lose my brother the same year I might lose my mother, so we are going to figure this out. Not today, but we will. Seo Jun broke. He put his head in his hands and sobbed. Minho did not move from his chair. He did not reach across the desk, but he did not look away either. It was not a full reconciliation. It was the first crack of light through a closed door, and for now, it was enough. Later that week, Minho flew Naomi from Tempe to Atherton on a private jet. When Naomi walked through the front door of the estate, Maria was standing in the foyer. The moment they saw each other, Maria ran. She grabbed her sister and held her so tight that Naomi laughed and said, "I cannot breathe." Maria did not let go. She cried into her sister's shoulder, not from fear, from relief. From the overwhelming realization that Minho had moved heaven and earth to protect her family without being asked, without wanting credit, without expecting anything in return. That night, after Naomi was settled in a guest room, Minho found Maria in the garden. She was sitting on a stone bench, looking up at the sky. The stars over Atherton were faint because of the ambient light, but Maria was looking for them anyway. He sat beside her. "My mother asked about you again," he said. "She said, 'The girl with the voice, bring her to see me.'" He paused. "She has never asked to meet anyone I have been connected to." Maria smiled. "I would love to meet her." They sat in silence for a moment. Then Minho spoke again, and his voice was different, stripped of every wall he had ever built. "I built all of this," he said. "The company, the reputation, the empire, and none of it kept me warm at night. None of it sat in my kitchen and made me soup with the wrong seasoning." Maria laughed quietly. "None of it prayed for me in the dark when I did not deserve it. You did that, and I do not know how to be the kind of man who deserves you yet, but I want to try." Maria's eyes filled. She turned to him and said, "You do not have to deserve me, Minho. You just have to let me love you." He kissed her, for real. Slowly, gently, with the kind of tenderness that a man like Minho Park was not supposed to be capable of. Under the open sky, in the garden of the empire he built, the man the business world called the Korean Mafia boss finally surrendered to the one thing he could not control. The next morning, Minho received a call from his mother's medical team in Beverly Hills. They needed him to come in, immediately, but the doctor's voice was different this time. It was not grim. It was not heavy. It was surprised. Minho and Maria drove to Beverly Hills together. Naomi stayed behind at the estate with Mrs. Cho, who had already started teaching her how to make Korean tea and was pretending she was not enjoying the company. Maria held Minho's hand the entire drive. Neither of them spoke much. The weight of what might be waiting at the end of the drive was too heavy for small talk. When they arrived at the facility, the lead oncologist, Dr. Ayanna Richardson, met them in the corridor. She was a tall woman with calm eyes who had been treating Eunice for months. Minho had seen many expressions on her face: careful neutrality, clinical concern, measured optimism. But today her expression was something new. She looked genuinely surprised. "Mr. Park," she said, "your mother's latest scans show something we did not anticipate. The tumor has not grown. In fact, it has decreased in size, measurably. The treatment is responding in a way we did not expect based on her initial prognosis." Minho stood very still. "What does that mean?" "It means we have time, more than we originally projected. Possibly a year, possibly longer. We want to continue the treatment aggressively. I am not calling this remission. But I am telling you that what we are seeing is very, very encouraging." Minho said nothing. He turned away from the doctor and put his hand on the wall of the corridor. His head dropped. His shoulders shook once. Maria stepped forward and placed her hand on his back. She did not say anything. She just stood there with her palm flat between his shoulder blades and let him feel that he was not alone. He turned around. His eyes were red. His face was wet. He pulled Maria into him and held her so tightly she could feel his heartbeat hammering against her chest. He whispered into her hair, "You prayed for this." She whispered back, "I prayed for you. God handled the rest." They went in to see Eunice. She was sitting up in bed, looking better than she had in weeks. Her color was warmer. Her eyes were brighter. When she saw Maria walk through the door, her face changed completely. She held out both hands. "So you are the one," Eunice said. Maria walked to her bedside and took her hands. "It is so good to finally meet you, Mrs. Park." "Eunice," she corrected. "You call me Eunice." She squeezed Maria's hands and looked her up and down with the kind of thorough examination that only a Korean mother could deliver in 3 seconds flat. Then she nodded, apparently satisfied. "Sing for me." Maria glanced at Min-ho. He was standing by the window, arms crossed, watching them with an expression she had never seen on his face before. It took her a moment to identify it. It was peace. Maria sang, softly, gently. She sang, "It is well with my soul." Her voice filled the small hospital room like something warm and golden. By the second verse, Eunice was crying. By the chorus, the nurse standing by the door had tears running silently down her cheeks. Min-ho stood by the window with his arms still crossed and his jaw tight and tears falling freely, and he did not try to hide them. When the song ended, Eunice looked at her son. She said in Korean, with absolute certainty and the authority of a woman who had built a family from nothing and watched it become an empire, "This one. Keep this one." Min-ho nodded. "I intend to." 3 separate guests at the Park Foundation benefit had posted clips of Maria's performance online. One of them had posted the entire song. Within 4 days, the video had over 2 million views. People were sharing it everywhere. The comments were overwhelming. "Who is this woman? I am literally sobbing in my car right now. Someone sign her immediately. This is the purest voice I have heard in 10 years." Maria's old TikTok video from the Scottsdale Street Fair resurfaced. Entertainment blogs picked up the story. The narrative wrote itself. A talented singer who gave up her dream to care for her dying mother, took a job as a maid to survive, and was discovered singing at a billionaire's charity benefit. It was the kind of story the internet could not resist. Within 2 weeks, Maria received calls from 2 major record labels and an independent producer based in Los Angeles named Curtis Webb, who specialized in artists with gospel and soul roots. Curtis was in his 50s, soft-spoken, and had spent 30 years in the music industry without ever losing his integrity. He reminded Maria of her mother. He did not make promises he could not keep. He did not flash money or connections. He said, "I heard your voice and I have not been able to stop thinking about it. I think you have something the world needs to hear, and I would like to help you share it if you will let me." Maria signed with Curtis. Min-ho told her, "You do this on your terms, not theirs, not mine, your terms." She chose Curtis because he felt right, because the music mattered more to him than the money, because her mother would have liked him. Maria recorded her first EP in a studio in Beverly Hills over the course of 3 weeks. She wrote every song herself. The title track was called "Behind the Door." It was about a woman who knelt beside her bed one night and prayed for a man she barely knew, a man she could not fix and was not trying to fix, a man she simply asked God to hold because she could see he was falling apart and nobody else seemed to notice. She did not know, when she prayed that prayer, that he was standing on the other side of the door, listening. She did not know that her words would crack him open. She did not know that the most powerful man she had ever met would sit on the floor of his own hallway and weep because someone, finally, fought for him in the dark. When Min-ho heard the finished track for the first time, he was sitting in his car in the parking lot of Park Capital Group's headquarters in Menlo Park. He played it once, then again, then a third time. He sat there with the engine off and the windows up and his head back against the seat and let the song wash over him. He called her. She picked up on the second ring. He said, "You wrote that about me." She said, "I wrote that about us." Seo Jun cooperated fully with the federal investigation into Victor Hale. He provided testimony, documentation, and every piece of communication between himself and Victor. It cost him. Some professional doors closed permanently. Some people who used to take his calls stopped answering. But it earned him the one thing he had wanted his entire life, his brother's genuine respect. Min-ho offered Seo Jun a position at Park Capital Group, not as a subordinate, not as the little brother who got a courtesy title, as a partner. "I should have done this years ago," Min-ho said. "I was so busy protecting you that I forgot to make room for you." Seo Jun accepted. They were not fully healed. The scar tissue from the betrayal was still tender. But they were building something new on top of what had broken, and for the first time, they were building it together. Victor Hale's empire crumbled in slow motion. The SEC investigation resulted in formal charges. His assets were frozen pending the inquiry. His partners abandoned him publicly. His name, which once commanded respect and fear in boardrooms from Palo Alto to Manhattan, now appeared only in headlines about fraud and federal investigations. He had made the singular, catastrophic mistake of threatening the one person Minho Park would go to war for. And he lost everything because of it. 6 months later, the Atherton estate was quiet in that particular way it got in the evenings, when the work was done and the light through the windows turned golden and the house felt less like a monument and more like a home. Maria walked down the second-floor hallway. She passed the library where she had first sung for Minho without knowing he was listening. She passed the kitchen where she had made him soup with the wrong seasoning and left it outside his door with a note. She walked to the small staff bedroom near the back staircase, the one she had lived in when she first arrived. She had not slept there in months. She had moved into the main house. But tonight, she wanted to come back to this room. She wanted to remember. She opened the door. The room was exactly as she had left it. Small, simple, the single bed with the white comforter, the window that looked out over the garden. Maria knelt beside the bed. She folded her hands. She prayed. She thanked God for the medical debt that was nearly paid off, thanks to the EP that had already earned more than she ever imagined. She thanked God for Naomi, who had graduated from Arizona State 2 months ago and was starting her first teaching job in the fall. She thanked God for Eunice, who was still fighting, still sharp, still calling Maria every Sunday to ask when she was coming to visit and whether she was eating enough. She thanked God for the music that had finally, after years of silence and sacrifice, found its way back to her. And she thanked God for Minho. She said his name, just like she had that first night. She said, "Thank you for letting me see him, Lord, not the version of him the world sees, the real him, the one who sits on floors and cries, the one who keeps notes in his desk drawer, the one who flew my sister across the country because he could not stand the thought of her being afraid. Thank you for trusting me with his heart." On the other side of the door, Minho stood in the hallway, just like the first night, his shoulder against the wall, his head tilted toward the door, listening. But this time was different. This time he was not crying from pain. He was not drowning. He was not alone. He was crying because for the first time in his 34 years on this earth, he knew what it felt like to be fully, completely, unconditionally loved by someone who had never wanted anything from him. She did not want his money. She did not want his power. She did not want his name or his empire or his connections. She wanted him to be okay. That was all she had ever wanted. And it was the most valuable thing anyone had ever given him. Minho opened the door. Maria looked up from beside the bed. Her eyes were wet. His were too. He walked into the room. He knelt beside her. He took her hand. And the man the business world called the Korean Mafia boss, the man who had built an empire on control and power and iron discipline, bowed his head beside the woman who had changed his life with a whispered prayer. And for the first time in his life, he prayed with her. The room was quiet. The estate was still. Outside the window, the garden Gus kept so carefully was dark and peaceful. Somewhere in Beverly Hills, Eunice Park was sleeping soundly, gaining strength for tomorrow. Somewhere in San Jose, Seo Jun was reviewing documents for his first major project as a partner at Park Capital Group. Somewhere in Tempe, Naomi Bellamy was organizing her classroom for the school year, humming a song her sister wrote. And in a small room in a big house in one of the wealthiest cities in America, 2 people who had found each other in the most unlikely way knelt side by side and thanked God for the thing that neither money nor power could buy. Each other. The most powerful thing you can do for someone is fight for them when they do not even know they need it.